But when we realize that it's pure love is unconditioned love. Means that I love you no matter what. Right? And so we have to get out of this God that needed anger management. And well, if you keep doing this, I'm going to burn you in hell and all that kind of stuff. And I always say this, you know, just as Jesus said, I didn't come to destroy what the prophets have written before me in the Old Testament. I haven't come to destroy what the predecessors of 12 Steps have destroyed. I haven't come to destroy that, but to fulfill it. So we're taking this thing to a new level. This is new thought based in ageless wisdom. You know, that we live in a universe that's on our side to do great things. Nothing's against us. Just imagine if there was such a power against the world that we wouldn't be here today. You know, everything is always growing and unfolding in the most magnificent way. The first law of life is the law of harmony that says everything is in divine and perfect order. And the reasons we have problems because we go against that grain. We go against that harmony based in fear. And I always say there's only two thought processes that exist in life. You're either in fear or you're in love, which is God. Choose ye this day who you're going to serve. You can't serve two masters at the same time. So we have to understand that everything that God is, we are. Because we're created in the image and out of the likeness. I and the Father are one. You and the Father are one. There is no separation. Matter of fact, the only problems that you will ever have in your life comes from as a result of a felt sense of separation from this perfect power. And I say felt sense because in reality you never can be separated. Just as a wave can never be separated from the ocean, you can never be separated from this perfect power. In this perfect power, you live, move, and have your being. It is a force field of energy, of love, of intelligence that permeates everything. There is no getting out of it. So our responsibility is to raise our consciousness and wake up to the divine truth about ourselves. That there is no separation between this perfect power. It's not out there, someday it'll be with you, someday it ain't. No, it's not. Someday you're awake and some days you're asleep. That's the only difference. Some days we're conscious and some days we're unconscious. So your conscious connection to that perfect power within you. So you're all, like I said earlier, you're always connected. You can never be separated. And so when we know that and we keep this in mind, we feel that no matter where we go, the universe truly is on our side to do great things. That the job I'm looking for really is looking for me. The relationship I'm looking for is looking for me. Right? Perfect health is mine to have if I do my part. If I stop putting all these meats in my body and start eating more plant-based foods, right, and drinking more water and doing a little exercise and stop stressing, I might experience some of this perfect health and leave off some of these thousands of drugs they got you taking, right? There was an amazing movie called Simply Raw that was done about a couple years ago. And in this movie, they had an amazing thing where they took like 10 people from across the United States who were suffering from diabetes. And they took them on this trip to Arizona to prove to them, like Hippocrates said many years ago, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And they proved to these people in 30 days that they could heal themselves from diabetes. And when they took them there, like some of these people were on like 30 meds, 10 meds. One guy had type 1 diabetes, which means that his body didn't produce enough insulin. So he had to have insulin, but everybody else was on meds. But after 30 days of eating a raw diet, right? Vegetables and fruits, raw fruits and vegetables, doing meditation and yoga and things like that, nobody was on meds at the end of those 30 days, except for the one guy who was taking insulin, and his insulin went from 28 milligrams to like 5 milligrams. And it had never been that low ever in his life. So there is a universal conspiracy that's going on if we do our part. So we have to do our part, and we have to wake up and start treating ourselves and putting things in our body that promote health and wholeness and life. And so when we do that, we'll begin to reap the fruits and stuff of things that we're supposed to have. So knowing the rules of how the game is played and who you are and how divine you are and how intelligent you are, and that you can never be out of this perfect power. In this perfect power you live, move, and have our being. Our responsibility is to take ourselves to another level. And you know, I always said the first commitment I made in this recovery process is that I wasn't going to use no matter what. On September 15th, 1985, I made that commitment to myself that I'm not going to use no matter what. And during these last 26 years, I've had a lot of no matter whats. Bankruptcies, massive asthma attacks, divorces, you name it. But I haven't found it necessary to use no matter what. And the second commitment I had to make myself, that I had to tell myself, is that I must be willing to change more than I'm willing to stay the same, which is even just as powerful as the commitment not to use. Because I meet a lot of people who get clean, but they don't think they have to change. They think that drugs are their problem. Only to find out it's not the drugs that their problem, it's their theory about life that's the problem. It's their belief systems that's the problem more than anything else. So in this thing of taking ourselves to the next level where we want to go, we have to get leverage. What I mean by this, that you have to, you know, I always say that there's two driving forces in our life more than anything else that drive us, and that's pain and that's pleasure. These are the two driving forces in our life, and until we begin to associate some of our things with utter pain, we won't stop using. I always tell this, and I work around people in this field all day long. And the truth of the matter is, unless you begin to associate using drugs with utter pain, you won't stop. Unless you begin to associate smoking cigarettes with utter pain, you won't stop smoking. Because I can tell you this personally. You know, I remember, I tell the story about me stopping smoking, being in the VA hospital down in San Diego and having a massive asthma attack, and being in the hospital with two guys who were dying of cancer, two old men who were dying of cancer at the time. And I told myself, and it looked so painful watching them suffer all night long and coughing, and one of them had a hole in his neck and was still smoking, right? And it was so painful to watch them that I said I would never ever smoke a cigarette ever in my life again. And so every time I think about smoking a cigarette, I think about them guys. Even 26 years later, I still think about them guys, right? But don't get me wrong, every once in a while I tell myself, well, it sure would be nice to have a drag at least. You know, after a good meal and after sex or something like that. But then I come back to that and I realize that a drag has never been enough of anything for me. That once I have the drag, then I got to have a whole cigarette. Then I got to have a pack, and then I'm feeling guilty. I got to have some weed, and then I need some wine to go with the weed. And before you know it, I'm shooting dope again. Right? This is how it works for me. I've proven this to myself. You know, give me a rope, I want to be a cowboy. Give me an inch, I want a mile. So this is part of the nature of people with addictive personalities. So I don't trick myself into believing that. And we have to sometimes, some of us, you know, we want to romanticize using. We want to, you know, we have this selective amnesia where we only remember the good part, the good times about using. We don't want to talk about the times we got locked up and got arrested and evicted from apartments and wind up places like this, having to sleep with 4 and 5 guys in a room and all that kind of stuff. See, we only want to remember the good things. So we got to get leverage. And the leverage says that, man, if I don't continue to do this, I'm going to continue to get what I got and worse. So we got to play it out, the scenario in its worst, you know, in its worst picture. And this is what I mean by getting leverage. If I don't stop eating the way I am, I'm going to die like my father died. And this is one of the things that made me stop eating meat years ago. Is that I remember how my father had to see him, visit him in the hospital, and watching him die of diabetes and high blood pressure when I was in high school when he was like 62 years old. And I said, I'm not going out like that. You know, sometimes they say certain things are hereditary. What's hereditary is ignorance. You know, sickness is not hereditary, but it's ignorance as to how this sickness works and what we can do to turn things around, because everything is pretty much reversible if we have a right mindset and we start to eat the things we're supposed to eat. So we got to get leverage. And the leverage means that, man, I can, you know, if I continue to use or drink, I'm going to die. You know, and subconscious mind can't tell if you're telling the truth or not, because you've been fooling it for a long time as it is now. So it doesn't know what's real and what ain't real, but we have to do this. And unless we get leverage, we're going back out there. Unless you begin to